My name is Bill Milbrand, born and raised in Shamokin. I love Shamokin. I served throughout the years in many different capacities. I was very active in the volunteer fire service. I started out as a firefighter, went to a lieutenant, then to captain, and then finally reached the plateau as fire chief. Well, that's not really the plateau, because then I also served on city council and acted at the real plateau of director of public safety. And after that, I moved on just a little bit further, ran for mayor, and had one successful term as mayor and brought the city out of some very trying times. We entered into the Act 47 for distressed municipalities during my term as mayor. So my term as mayor was kind of a tough one, getting the city, trying to get the city back on track. So, and I think we're moving ahead with leaps and bounds as we speak. I'm back on council, back serving as the director of public safety again. I've always uh, loved the history of Shamokin. I don't know where it came from. I guess it just appeared, but I remember buying the first book, the centennial edition of the Greater Shamokin Area Centennial. In high school, I wrote my research paper in high school on the history of Shamokin, and I got that's probably one of the only good grades I ever got in high school. I was born in 1959. From 1959 on, of course, the centennial and those types of celebrations were huge. One of the milestones would have to be in 1951 when the city of Shamokin moved the government from being a borough to being a city. So we weren't actually a city, and we're just one of only two cities in Northumberland County, and the city of Sunbury and the city of Shamokin. And we didn't get our third-class city status until 1951. Remember, we had three movie theaters in Shamokin: the Majestic, the Victoria, and the Capitol. So that was World War II era. If you look at photographs and images from back then, streets were just absolutely crowded with people. Independence Street was just a sea of people. There wasn't any cars. There were cars in the parking spaces, but there's people. I took a walk with a friend of mine just not too long ago, and we walked up one side of Independence Street and down the other side, and I named every store that used to be there, and the storefronts were all full, and there were so many stores: Moser's store, Tobias's, there was a Montgomery Ward's, there was, and a lot of people remember Montgomery Ward's when it was on Market Street, when you could go in the Market Street side and come out on the Independence Street side. That was a big thing there at the corner where Central Pennsylvania Savings is now. That was Regal and Bloom and the R Coffee Shop, and of course Montgomery Ward's. I ask everybody, where did you grow up? Where did you grow up? Well, we grew up on South Rock Street. We grew up on South Diamond Street. We grew up on Cole Street. We grew up on, and if you look at the areas today, unfortunately, nobody today wants to move into a little 12-foot house in a row. But back in those days, people didn't have a lot of money, and they were nice, cozy homes in a great neighborhood where Mrs. So-and-so baked a pie, and all the kids from the whole neighborhood would come to the porch and have a piece of the pie, and it was great. And just people that I spoke with who grew up on South Rock Street, it was just a nice little neighborhood, and all these little neighborhoods had everybody knew everybody, and it was great. The Fifth Ward was noted for a lot of things that went on down there. They had they would close down the street and have a block party. All the neighbors would come out and they'd have a block party in the middle of the street. So the Fifth Ward, at one time, there were primarily a lot of Italians down in the Fifth Ward. And the Fifth Ward, there's also, you didn't venture into the Fifth Ward after dark unless you were from the Fifth Ward. And these are stories that I'm told, mind. I didn't experience any of this, but and I'm sure that Mr. Dudek will be able to fill you in much better than I. But from what I understand, there was you weren't welcome in the Fifth Ward if you ventured there after night unless you were from the Fifth Ward. And yeah, I'm sure there were a lot of people who, to not to put it any other way, but got a lot of beatings down in the Fifth Ward. So a lot of bloody noses probably and whatnot, and it became known as the Bloody Fifth. It's always, ever since I can remember, it was the Bloody Fifth. I'm also a big railroad historian. The engine house for the Reading Railroad is down in the Fifth Ward, and I spent a lot of time there at the Reading Railroad engine house. Our neighbors, Gabe and Margaret Moore, he worked for the railroad, and he took me down to the engine house on many occasions, and I loved it because that was my thing. And I still do have a passion for the railroad today. Um, I would love to see trains come back to Shamokin at one point, but last train that left Shamokin was in 1964, early 64 was when the King Cole made a round trip to Philadelphia from Shamokin every day, and left in the morning, came back in the evening, and the decline in ridership. It was post World War II that the decline came in Shamokin because there were other. That's when the whole, not only the Shamokin area, but the whole world started moving to other home heating sources rather than anthracite coal, and they started using oil and natural gas, and of course, after that, the coal industry declined, and then some of the rules and regulations for deep mining. Uh, that helped to decline the coal industry, and also the coal that is left under Shamokin, a lot of it got very deep, and it was very difficult to mine because it was underwater. So not only did they have to go in to mine the coal, but they had to pump the water as well. And things got very difficult to deep mine coal. And then they went to strip mining, but strip mining, some of the bigger coal companies went to strip mining. But then also, as the big collieries and the big coal companies closed down, there had to be something for these miners that were all out of work to do. And that's when the phrase bootleg mining, or independent miners is what it's technically called, but they were all called bootleggers. And they went out to the different workings around the area, and they went down and set up a little mining operation of their own. They were very dangerous, really, because they didn't have all of the money to do it right. They were doing it to try and make a living and to try and feed their families. So that's where the term bootlegger came. And there was a lot of bootleggers around Shamokin. There was only two collieries that were in the confines of the city of Shamokin. Because remember, Shamokin is only one, we're landlocked. We're 1 square by 1 square, and we're landlocked in between Cole Township. So most of the operations were in Cole Township, but there were two. One was down in the Fifth Ward, and that was called the Dancott, and the other one was the Nelson, which was over in Fifth Street. So they were the only two coal operations that were actually in the city of Shamokin. The rest were all in Cole Township, but everybody that lived in Shamokin also worked at these operations. And when they started closing down, some pre-World War II, but most of them post-World War II, started closing down, and that sent these independent miners out. Like I said, that some of these folks, that's all they knew. They just knew the coal industry. Years ago, is the amount of bars that were in Shamokin, and of course they said at one point there was a church and a bar on every corner, you know. So we had our share of churches and we had our share of bars. There were a lot of them in Shamokin, and now that's dwindled also. You know, it's the bar business is not a good business really to be in. I was born in the 800 block of Walnut Street, and I was about 4 years old when we moved up to where I presently live now, at the top of Liberty Street up on the steps. And there was a little grocery store out there, Felon's Store. My mother said if I didn't behave, she was taking me up to Johnny's and getting the cleaver after me. So just jokingly, she would take me up there and say that he's not behaving today, and Johnny'd pick that cleaver up. You're gonna get it, and I was scared to death of that. And not only the mom and pop grocery stores, but look at how many shoemaker shops. Who goes today to get their shoes mended? I think the last shoe repair that we had in Shamokin was Verano's on Market Street. That was probably the last shoemaker we had, but there were many shoemakers, barber shops. There were barber shops all over town. I went to Dixie's when I was a kid, and you know but there were many barber shops. So, and even little restaurants around town. Independence Street probably had 2 or 3 restaurants. Arvy's restaurant. And a few more. And of course, our staple, the Coney Island, has been there forever and ever and ever. The Garant family. Before the decline of the coal industry, each one of those the coal collieries were serviced by a railroad. Now, all of there was 2 major coal companies that would be the Philadelphia and Reading Coal and Iron Company and the Susquehanna Coal Company. And incidentally, both of them had offices at the corner of Shamokin and Sunbury Street. The building where former Mayor Boyer, the upper floors of that were the offices of the Philadelphia and Reading Coal and Iron Company. And then right across the street where Shamokin Equipment Company that was the Susquehanna Coal Company offices on the 2nd floor of that building. So yeah, they were the 2 major coal companies, and all of the Susquehanna collieries were served by the Pennsylvania Railroad, and all of the Philadelphia and Reading Coal and Iron collieries were serviced by the Reading Railroad. So, but they had crews that were just mine crews that went out, and that's all they did was shift cars and load cars from these different collieries. Tracks went up into Burnside, all the way out into Bear Valley to the 3rd patch where the breaker was. The tracks went up Big Mountain to the Henry Clay Colliery. So all of these collieries were shipping coal, and of course that was one of the mainstays. And when coal started declining, this was another thing that hurt the railroads. And then of course when you got a shipment in, for instance, Jones Hardware or some of the appliance, they would get all of their appliance shipped in by rail and would go to a ramp loading area at the rail yard, and they would have the guys there in a truck and back in. The flour for Yock's Bakery was delivered by rail. They would get a rail car of flour. Newsprint at one time for the News Dispatch at that time. But the News Item and News Dispatch, their newsprint came in huge rolls, and they were delivered by rail. So a lot of the stuff would come in by trains, and now that's all been pretty much replaced by the trucking industry. I think the railroad's coming back a little bit, but I don't think we'll ever see the rail service like we had. The fire department at one time, before the days of pagers and communication centers, had pull boxes. They're Gamewell fire alarm pull boxes, and they were various areas around the city. And each station had a huge board in their station that said, for instance, box 44 would have been Market and Arch Streets, and box 45 might have been Spruce and 6th. You know, they all had their assigned areas. So if you knew of a fire or your house was on fire, you ran down to the corner, and you should be familiar with where the boxes are. You ran down to the corner, you opened up the box and turned the key, and that would start the Gamewell fire horns that were in town. And those fire horns were scary. got those fire horns, even though we don't use them anymore. We still have them. And it was tradition in the fire department that if a fire chief passed away, you would blow the horns manually, one blast every 3 minutes from the time that the deceased chief left the funeral home or the church until he got to the cemetery. There would be one blast every 3 minutes. And I did that for former Director of Public Safety Claude Kaler, because Claude was instrumental in bringing the fire department up to the standards it is today. Oh, here they are. I have them hidden back here, but they do work.
Wow. Oh man. Oh.
They're just a little. They're just. But these are the things. These are the things that made that.
That's crazy.
That whopping noise on top of the city hall. The things are loose right now. Let me see if I can straighten that. It looks kind of crappy because they're loose. The pipe fittings are loose. I can't. It keeps moving around on me. But yeah, they're the horns from the top of City Hall.
Where would the tank? Is the tank still there?
The tank is still up in the basement of City Hall.
Where did you find this?
That was in the basement of City Hall. I had it hanging in my office when I was.
Oh,
I had that hanging. It's gonna have to be cleaned up somehow.
I know.
And I don't know how you're gonna clean it up because you're gonna have to be careful because it's faded and.
Yeah.
But it was faded like that when I had it hanging in my office too.
Is that from the 70s or 80s? Like it looks like with the iron
64.
on. 64.
Oh really?
Yeah, because I saw one of the Brothers of the Brush groups or whatever had that.
Oh, okay. Wow. You know, I have both the Brothers of the Brush and Sisters of the Swish certificates.
Oh, do you?
Yeah. Yep. And the bow ties and the whole deal.